In this video, I am going to break down the Sixers' exact odds of keeping their top 6 pick and also landing in the top 4. I've received a lot of questions about this recently, and it is very confusing, so there's a lot of intricacies that you may think you understand, but you probably don't actually know. So luckily, I have done all of the math for you, and you can reference this back anytime leading up to the NBA draft lottery if you forget, or even the NBA draft, and hopefully the Sixers will keep their top 6 pick, but we'll talk about it all. I'm RB. Welcome into Philly Take with RB. If you do find this video helpful, be sure to leave a like at the end and subscribe to the channel. So we'll start it off with a picture of the Tankathon standings. Here we know the Sixers lie at number 5. They're tied with Brooklyn, 23-50 on the season, and there's 9 games left. Now, the fact that they're tied could create a lot of issues. We'll talk about that and how that will break down. But what do you think's going to happen? You know, if you look at the final games for the Sixers, right? Heat, Raptors, Knicks, Bucks, Minnesota, Miami, Washington, Atlanta, and Chicago. I mean, based on how the Sixers have been playing, the fact they lost to the Wizards the other night, I don't know if they're going to win a game the rest of the season. Obviously, we don't want them to. But, I mean, look, tickets as low as $3. That's crazy. Look, I think the Sixers have it figured out. I think they are the goats of tanking at this point. But then you have the Brooklyn Nets who play today and tomorrow. They play the Clippers, the Wizards, Mavs, Minnesota, Toronto, New Orleans, Atlanta, Minnesota again, and New York. I mean, can the Nets win 1 or 2 of these games? Will the Sixers win 1 or 2 of their games? That might be all it takes to decide who's getting that 5th pick and who's getting the 6th pick, or at least the 5th and 6th best odds, I should say. But anyway, it's going to come right down to the wire. It's an absolute dogfight. And how will the pick be decided? So let's talk about that, okay? Because we have referenced this chart, our best friend, many times. And there's a lot of numbers here, right? And somebody may come in here and look at this chart and be like, what the heck is this on tankathon.com? This is a representation of the percentage odds for each pick based on where a team finishes, right? So if the Sixers finished at number 5, they would have a 9.8% chance at number 1, 9.9 at number 2, and so on, right? So anyway, we look at Philly, we look at Brooklyn, 5 and 6, and, you know, we've talked about this a lot. However, when people come to this site, what they don't realize is that they have 2 different charts. One is including ties and one is without ties. And that's what really makes this whole thing complicated. So I've done my best here to kind of break down what the percentages are. And I've done all the math for you. So I'm going to pull up a document that hopefully makes it easier to understand. We're going to start off without ties. If the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets, and we're not really talking about the Raptors anymore because now they're 3 games behind the Sixers and Nets. Sure, they play both of those teams. They may be able to come back up, but for now, we're going to exclude them to make it easier to understand. So let's say the Sixers and the Nets finish without a tie, not the same record, and the Sixers finish at the number 5 slot with the 5th best odds in the Tankathon. They would then have a 63.9% chance of landing in the top 6 and keeping their pick, and a 42.1% chance of being in the top 4. If there is no tie, not the same record, and the Sixers finish at number 6, they would have a 45.8% chance of being in the top 6 and a 37.2% chance of being in the top 4. If there is no tie at all and they finish at the 7th best odds, they would have a 31.9% chance of being in the top 4. Now, let's say that there is a tie. Let's say the Sixers and the Nets lose out all of their remaining games and they are still tied at the end of the season. What happens? And this is the thing that people fail to understand. If we go to the tankathon.com and we talk about the draft order, right? Pretty much what happens is the top 4 picks are a lottery. They're ping pong balls. They're drawn. You know, last year we saw the Hawks. What were they, like the 9th or 10th worst team? They got lucky, right? And they went all the way up to number 1. But after that draft lottery, the rest of the teams are decided in an inverse order based on their record. So, you know, after those 4 teams are done, the rest of the teams are then decided by worst record to best record in the lottery, and then so on. But that's why a lot of people talk about jumping up, right? If the Sixers finish 5th or 6th, you know, with the 5th or 6th worst record, they don't want the 7th, 8th, 9th, whatever team to jump up because then it gives them less of an opportunity, right? And that'll decrease their pick naturally, because if a team that finished with a better record than them jumps over them into the lottery, then if they don't make the lottery, their pick is going to go down. So that's why people talk about that. But here is the most important rule, okay? If teams finish with the same record, there is a random drawing that will decide who picks first. Literally a random pull of a ping pong ball. So that changes a lot. And if the 76ers, let's say they finish with the fifth best odds, the fifth worst record, tied with the Nets, and they lose this random ping pong ball drawing, they will have a 47.7% chance of being in the top 6 and keeping their pick, and a 39.6% chance of being in the top 4. Now, let's say the same situation holds, but they win the random pulling of the ping pong ball. Well, now their percentage of being in the top 6 and keeping their pick jumps up to 62.1%, and their chance of being in the top 4 goes to 39.8%. So really, that is a main determinant right here and could decide their fate, right? If they win that random drawing, if they're tied, they really need to win that, because their odds almost jump up by 15% of keeping their pick. Top 4 stays relatively similar, but this is why we've been preaching that they need to lose every game, why it is so vitally important for them to keep going out there. I know it's tough to watch, but chugging out these G League guys and, trying to put on the worst performance that they can. And obviously no Sixer fan wants to be here right now in this tankathon, and, it sucks. It really does stink. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you have an opportunity here, and you need to give yourself the best chance possible. Like I said, if there is no tie and the Sixers finish number 5, let's say the Sixers lose out and the Nets win one more game, then the Sixers are going to have almost a 64% chance of keeping that draft pick and a 42.1% chance of being in the top 4. Look, if you get up, say, to number 1, number 2, you never know what's going to happen. That could change the entire landscape of this franchise, right? We know they're restricted with the contract situations of Paul George and Joel Embiid and things like that. So if they can get a high-level impact player, and if you're watching March Madness right now, some of these guys are putting on a show. There's going to be a lot of good talent at the top of this draft class. Right now, the Sixers draft pick is top 6 protected. What does that mean? It means that they've already traded that pick to OKC. That pick currently belongs to OKC. However, if it lands in the top 6, right, top 6 protected, it stays with the 76ers and then conveys to OKC in a later year. So, like I said, this is really their one way out. They do have a second round pick, but there's a lot of good talent in this draft class, and they need to find a way, to keep that top 6 pick. And here it is. I mean, your percentage odds change drastically, right? So if we look at, again, how much these percentages rise, it's going to get interesting. And the Sixers have to find a way, to lose every single game. I mean, the teams I could see them beating, maybe Miami, even though they've been playing a bit better. They do play Washington again, which scares me. Washington just lost by like 50 points yesterday after they beat the Sixers and, the Raptors, right, who are actively trying to tank. So that's really where I'm looking at this right now. And, the Sixers, I mean, even on the remaining schedule strength, look how close this is. Sixers and the Nets have the 7th and 8th easiest remaining schedules, but they're separated by 0.001. So I know everybody's locked into the playoff race and the Western Conference is getting interesting, but this tankathon race is kind of getting spicy, if we're being honest. I mean, it is getting a little interesting. So the Raptors have the easiest remaining schedule. That'll most likely put them out of it. They should win a couple more games naturally. But I just wanted to break down the odds because a lot of people have been asking me recently, hey, what happens if we tie? Do we get the pick? Do we lose the pick? How does all that play out? And with 9 games to go, we're sitting here analyzing a tankathon, which is nowhere near where I thought we would be this season. But you have to adapt. You have to pivot. And it has to get worse before it gets better. So hopefully this team finds a way to get this done. I mean, if they could land a Cooper Flagg or an Ace Bailey or a Dylan Harper or an Edgecombe or even one of these bigs who are showing up right now in the tournament, I think it changes the whole franchise. So we'll see what happens. But if you did find this video helpful, be sure to leave a like. Be sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Really appreciate everybody for tapping in. And as always, I will catch you on the next one. Peace.